Well, good evening. Hello, Kate.
Good evening.
How are you? Is it okay to say Kate or do I need to say
Please say
Mayor?
Kate. No,
Okay.
Kate's great. And you'll probably recalled on how you go a long time without hearing your name. Like people call you things like
Yes.
mayor or your worship, or I
Yeah.
love hearing my name.
Yeah.
Like I love, so use it, please.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I'm the same.
Mm.
There's a time for formality, I guess, in our meetings and,
Mhm.
but I never really that your worship and mayor, this, mayor, that. I'd say like in meetings, of course, we use language like that, but everywhere else, we're Kate, we're Don, and let's just,
Especially with some city staff, because you get really close. Like, you work really closely with your CAO. And when he calls me your worship, I'm like, "Oh, just you can
yeah.
call me Kate," but it's out of respect, but it's really cute. At City Hall, they do like YW. It's hi YW, and I think that was cute. But you can call me Kate.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So look, we're going to have a fun chat tonight. I hope we can have just a very open chat. And it's a bit of a peek behind the curtain at this world of politics, municipal politics in particular. Over the last number of weeks, I've been having chats with former mayors. Some of them are senators now. I've done some in-person chats, and I'm really passionate about what. And we'll probably share
Mhm.
some comments tonight on whether you're in the seat or you're out of the seat. It's hard to get out of your blood the passion for better community.
Mhm.
And now that's what this conversation is about. And hopefully, as folks roll towards an election, between the two of us, we can add a little bit of, context and maybe some advice.
Mhm.
I don't tell people who to vote for in elections, but I do share my views on the types of character, the types of, skill sets that are important, and the complexities of the role in municipal politics. And the partnerships that have to happen between different levels of government and so on. So
Mhm.
anyway, I'm really looking forward to it tonight. So tonight's conversation is one I've been looking forward to, as I just said, for a while. We're sitting down with Mayor Kate Rogers, the Mayor of Fredericton, someone who stepped into public life with a strong background in community leadership and has navigated one of the most complex periods in municipal governance. I think coming out of COVID, I navigated 2016 to 2021 in
Mhm.
the city of St. John. A whole bunch of challenges, but COVID was an unprecedented. And then you took the seat coming, sort of the tail end of COVID and coming out of it, but very, very challenging time. So I want this to be an honest conversation, of course, not just about the wins, but about the weight of the role. I think it's important for folks to understand, from my perspective, the reality of the role, the behind the scenes, and what it means for anyone thinking about stepping up. At this stage, nominations are closed. So I guess to all the candidates out there, we'll say, put your seatbelts on and buckle up. So thanks so much for doing this tonight.
Thank you again for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's start at the beginning. What made you decide to run in the first place? And for those that maybe don't know you as well, if you'd like to provide a bit of a background, and how long have you been on council?
Okay, so well, my background is I'm a political scientist. I've a master's degree in political science. I've taught political science, and but I have sort of applied that knowledge in community, mostly in the nonprofit sector, and I've held various leadership roles. As you've pointed out, I've been the executive director of a few organizations, mostly arts related. So the New Brunswick Crafts Council, the Charlotte Street Arts Center. But then I had a very close working relationship with Andy Scott, who was our MP. And when I was a grad student, I actually worked with Andy as his policy assistant. And so when he finished in politics, we had stayed in touch throughout. And even when I stopped working for him, we were always communicating, and he was a mentor always. And he would also call me on issues and get my perspective, and that always felt
Yeah.
nice. But anyways, when he was finished, he established the Social Policy Research Network, or he wanted to. He had this idea that moving forward, networked governance, this idea of us sort of government, research, the civic leaders needed to come together to really to make decisions, to make informed decisions. And so he hired me to establish the network for him, to work with him, establish the network, which was wonderful. It was a really great opportunity to use my policy chops,
Mm.
and I really re-engaged with this love of politics and how to do it right. And mainly you do it right through networked governance is what I saw coming together. So that's in my background after, and then got that established, got it up and running. And then I moved on. I became the executive director of the Fredericton Community Foundation. And so that is sort of then the organization that provides granting to the
Yeah.
charitable sector. So this is sort of what my background is. But it was when I was working with Andy that I actually ran for council for the first time. And that was 14 years ago in 2012.
Mhm.
My main interest, because of my work in the nonprofit arts sector, where I had spent over a dozen years, I was always sort of frustrated by the fact that our city wasn't embracing its cultural sector. We were just so rich in arts and culture, a rich cultural history in built heritage, but also just in organizations and artists. And even though culture is a municipal service, our city was never really capitalizing on that, seizing it and capitalizing on it. Used to frustrate me terribly, Dawn.
Okay.
So I felt that culture was left out of the conversation. The other thing I felt people were left out of the conversation. It seemed that Fredericton worked really well for certain people, not really well for other people. At that point in time, it was mainly, I would say, on socioeconomic lines, but there was just this sense, I had this sense there were a whole bunch of people who needed to be better served
Mm.
by our city government.
Right.
So in 2012, I ran on a slogan, a city that works for everyone.
Okay. So council first
So
as a counselor,
it
sorry.
was a downtown. I live in a downtown ward. I ran for councillor in 2012 under that slogan, reoffered in 2016 under the same slogan, and then became the deputy mayor, was appointed as deputy mayor in my second term on council. And, we were moving the needle on certain things, but we weren't bringing big projects across the line. We were really in this period of efficiency. Fredericton, I'm very proud to say, is an extremely fiscally responsible city. We are the envy, I think, of a lot of cities in the province. I'm really proud of all of that work that we did in Lean Six, like in efficiency finding. I was part of it. And when you come from a nonprofit background, you know how to
You know
penny pinch.
how to manage dollars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially the
Yeah.
arts sector, you really know
Yeah.
how to manage dollars. So I was really committed to that work, but then it became to the point that it was stifling us. And there were things that our community was asking for, they deserved. We're a capital city, we were a growing city, and council wasn't delivering on it. And I was very frustrated. And this might also be a nice time. I don't know, as good a time as any to point out I was the only woman on council that
Yeah.
second term. And it also was impacting our decision making, particularly a person who's got in their mind a city that works for everyone. And our council was pretty monoculture.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can we make decisions for everyone when we don't even have a diversity of gender on this council, right? And it was not only limiting our decision making, it was also, there was some not so cool behavior that was taking place, some bro stuff, and, that I thought that needed to be called out. So I also did that on my second term and decided that it was time that Fredericton have a woman mayor and more women around that table.
Right. And so I just a couple of comments, the fiscal piece. So when I came to council in 2016, it's interesting because many folks that I've spoken to over the last number of weeks, and actually I see it I see it on an issue here close to me right now. People, and I don't know if this is the right or wrong. There's no judgment in this. I'm just observing that people get motivated, like something pisses them off and they decide to run, or they want to see some type of change, or it's interesting that that theme is woven in, I think, amongst a number of people who have, they must have in common, they care, they want to be part of they have a vision for a community that is something, better than it is,
Mhm.
better outcomes, more balanced, more equitable. And then something pushes them over the edge where they say, okay, now I'm gonna throw my name in the hat. And I think that, in many ways, in my case, I wasn't really pissed off about anything. I just thought we can do better. I think we
Mm.
can do better at some experience. And, also sort of ran on a theme around growth and two main principles. I said, look, first of all, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to make a promise I can't keep. And secondly, I'm going to live my values. So like what you see is what you get. So don't vote for me if you don't like what you see. 'Cause this is like, I can't change myself.
Had you been on council before you ran for mayor?
No, I had not. No, I mean, I'm sort of out of the blue, I'd worked in the corporate world. I'd run a small business. I was doing some coaching work, and Had spent 20 years away from the community and then came back and was like now day to day in the community. And probably a little bit of motivation too for me, Kate, because when someone tells me I can't do something, I get really motivated to do it.
Me too.
So, you know, I, yeah, I talked to my spouse, to my wife, Patty, and I said, look, I'm thinking about doing this. And she said, like, wow, I'm not surprised. And I think I took a step that I thought perhaps would talk me out of it, and I called 50 people. I said, "I'm gonna call
50.
50."
Wow.
50. I
Okay.
called
That's
50 people, and I said, "I'm gonna run this idea by them, and I'm gonna see what they say." And the overwhelming majority said, "Oh my gosh, like, absolutely, you'd be fantastic, do it." And now I've learned, I sort of chuckle, like, everybody wants the other person to run for council, you know? It's like, I think I got set up, right? But so before we transition, I've got another question for you, but Andy Scott, I think I met the MP maybe once. I flew home, and sat behind him once on a plane.
mm,
I think everybody knew Andy Scott, and the stories I hear, the story you just shared, the mentorship, the
mm,
leadership, he just really what a loss. He sounds like just such a wonderful person, and anyone that has ever had a connection to Andy or worked with Andy or served on a committee with him, I hear the same
mhm.
admiration that you and the words that you use to describe him, and it just struck me that we need more, uh,
Andy's.
Andy Stotts today, like yeah,
Oh, yeah, and he worked across party lines.
yeah,
Andy I was brought on to work with him to do it was the early days of public engagement. We would go out and do these people's forums, and he would go into he would pick an issue, a hot item, a hot topic in the riding. He would say, "We're gonna talk about this," and we would write a background. I was responsible for putting the background paper together, and then we would go out. We would have 2 co-chairs kind of that brought different perspectives to the issue, and then we would go out and spend a Sunday afternoon someplace in the riding with folks who would come and talk about the issue and make recommendations, and then I would write a final report, and we would send it out to all the participants. We did that, like, all the time. And
wow,
the crazy things like gun control at the Stanley High School, and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
of all the different types of
yeah,
topics. When we did economic development, he also did community development because he saw how important how the 2 went hand in hand, right? And just yeah, how
seems like
awesome is that? And that was
yeah, yeah.
1990s we were doing that work.
Yeah, it seems like we need, I mean, again, social media is wonderfully ugly, right? I mean, I think we believe that sometimes we put a post up and we say, "Well, that's engaging." And I think it seems to me like I almost got this visualization of MP Scott rolling his sleeves up and walking into the gymnasium and saying, "Okay, let's have this chat."
Yeah.
When we get back to what did you think the job, and I guess I'm asking you about your time
Mhm.
now as mayor. What did you think the job would be, and how did it compare to the reality once you were in it?
So luckily, and maybe being a student of this or the fact that I'd been on council for 9 years prior, the job was exactly what I thought it was gonna be. And on something and I will say one, deterrent for me from running was the public facing aspect of it, and it's not because I'm shy, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
Right, right.
I love people. I love public speaking. It's not that I don't enjoy that aspect of it. It's more, I really like doing the work. Like it's probably because of my policy background and because I've run organizations. I like the office work. Like I like being in City Hall and being part of making things happen. And I know governance well enough to know that's not my job. The
Yeah,
CAO works for council, and it's the CAO's job to
yeah,
carry out the wishes of council. I knew what was going to be hard for me was keeping my fingers out of that. I'm very respectful of our CAO, and I'm very careful to not, but I miss that, and it's probably one of the reasons why I'm pulling away now. I mean, we'll get to that probably too, but I have filled a lot of what I set out to do. And so now I'm sort of looking forward to getting behind the scenes and doing the work again. So I think but like I said, it didn't catch me off guard. I knew when I ran that was part of the job, and luckily because I do really like people and I love being in the community, I've never minded doing it. I just wish there was maybe a little bit more of the other stuff. Like I spend a lot of time with certain staff people, like the housing, the folks who are doing all the housing stuff. I spend a lot of time with them
Sure.
working on a lot of the files, and I'm amazed at how our city hall, how adapt, and probably every city hall, successful, sophisticated organizations adapt to different leaders. And our CAO mayor's office has been very adaptive to a mayor who wants to do the work. I don't treat it like it's not a retirement job for me. It's not a second job for me. It's not this is my job. I left a profession to do this job and we figured it out. So, like I say, not unexpected, but probably, you know, it is what I knew that it was going to be.
Is, observing, we talked a bit about it with your fiscal, when I became mayor in 2016, I was also, and I showed up the morning after the election with my backpack on saying, let's get to work. And, the clerk said, well, not even sure if you can. Certainly it wasn't
We've
sworn
got
in, but
authority.
the office was vacated. They said, I guess you can go sit in your office and then, let's get at it. Right. So wanted to start reading documents and so on. And as we got our feet underneath us as a council, we did look to Fredericton and, in terms of your fiscal responsibility, I think you'd done a better job, frankly, than we had in St. John in terms of your debt levels and some of those other things. So, and I know there was a very close working relationship between the mayors at the time, but also our CAOs. You had the Tri-Cities at the time, Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John working closely. At the time, we had Jeff Trail, our CAO, who had come out of Fredericton, who, Fredericton was home and actually left St. John to become your deputy CAO for a while in Fredericton. So, we did look to Fredericton and I think, as a benchmark to say, okay, how can we be different and do things a bit differently? And then on the governance side, my observation, Kate, as well, is that, you had a very sophisticated council that, maybe the grass is always greener on the other side. But, that issue of governance, I would observe that a lot of people don't understand it. Usually say like eyes on, hands off. Your CAO is your employee and he does everything else operationally. And I see that in candidates who I think are going to struggle. Like I think it'd be very difficult on the organizations. I'm seeing the grass is very green in Fredericton. Did it feel like that? Was everything sort of under control? Did your team understand governance? Was it smooth?
Well, so I was, like I said, having gone through the system in various roles, I chaired various committees. I had a very strong sense when I became the mayor of how I wanted it to, good governance practices and ensuring that they stayed in place. But there were times, especially new councillors, don't always understand that. So the returning councillors, for the most part, they had a real appreciation and understanding of that. We do a pretty robust orientation at the beginning of each council term. So that helps as well. But definitely the early months of maybe up to the first year, it was a lot of me reminding councillors, no, you don't go to staff. If you have an issue, you bring that to the CAO. The CAO goes to staff.
Yeah.
That is not your role. If you get complaints from residents, that is not your role to go directly to the staff person. There is a process that we work through. So there were a few gentle reminders that needed to be made. And I did that. And our CIO also would help with that if he was seeing, or sometimes he would see counselors overstep, would come to me and I would deal with it. And so definitely that was part of it. But we got past that relatively early on in the term because we were just quite persistent in reminding people of how it needs to function. But we have an opportunity. We have standing committees in Fredericton, which I love that model because it means that I have chairs. I'm able to choose often your more experienced counselors to be the chairs of the standing committees. And so a lot of the work also then happens at a committee level. So counselors have a chance to be part on a regular every Thursday at lunch. So not just on Monday nights, every Thursday at lunch, council is in active conversation on topics of different city different city responsibilities. So I think that keeps them engaged without them meddling. It keeps them engaged at more that above where they need to be, but not doing the meddling. And so I feel that we have created a system that helps with some of
I often, yeah, that's excellent. I often reflected and sometimes joked with citizens, and I would say something to the effect, I wish I had as much power as you think I have, because really it's voting in the case of a tie, proclamations and special meetings. Like, other than that, Adam Lorden, when we chatted a couple of weeks ago, sort of highlighted this, and I'm just wondering if you agree, highlighted it's really soft power, right? I mean, it's, yes, of course, there's a role, there's a legislative role, and the difference between the mayor and members of council. But there's a nuance to it, to being a mayor, to leading a group of, typically, your council members, they're take charge type of folks. They want to get things done. It can be challenging. Would you agree with that concept of soft power, or did you use a different technique to help keep council together, focused, and sort of pointed in the right directions?
So I feel that the mayor actually has a lot of, I mean, soft power is a really interesting way to put it, but we have a lot of it. So, and in Fredericton, I get to choose my committee chairs, right? So the committees that I think need some extra weight, some extra push, I pick the right personality for that job, right? So like that's power, that's a power of sort, identifying who's best for certain roles and things. I get to do that. The weekly agenda meeting with the city clerk, helping to determine what's on the agenda and what gets presentations, what doesn't, ordering of agenda. Like I feel that while they might be seen as soft powers, they actually very much set tone and a rhythm for the work, so I consider that really important. But to me, what another thing that I've done is the way that I manage meetings is I ensure that I stay within the procedure, but I allow a lot of latitude for conversation as long as it happens through me and the chair and it's controlled. We have these rules, you can only speak once or whatever. We don't follow that. I'm like, we will talk about this until everyone feels good about it. We might not all agree. And we have had more votes carried on division than I ever recall, but it's always respectful. We get to a point the way that the meeting is managed, everybody has an opportunity to share their thoughts, for the discussion, I don't know, to be generative. And so I think that you can also wield power through how you manage meetings.
Right.
And as a result, we haven't had drama on council. Like the meeting doesn't end where councilors feel they haven't had an opportunity to speak their piece, right? So no. And then the final thing I'll say as far as power, whatever that is, we set the tone. Like the mayor we're the personality of the city in a lot of ways. So that's a lot of, I don't know if you call it power, but that's a really important role. Like having to help, being the personality in Fredericton, our big one is kind but firm. Like there are rules we follow here and we will execute them as kindly as possible and always thinking of everyone. But we have certain standards and they will be followed.
Yeah, that's great advice. And especially I like, the latitude, using that power of the chair to provide some latitude, because I'm just imagining, and again, we did, we did in St. John certainly manage those time allocations and so on to try to keep the meetings moving along as efficiently as possible. But I also see how that can, if you don't feel like you've gotten your opportunity to get, your points on the table, and you've been given your 2-3 minute opportunities to speak, that could lead to a lot of frustration for people. So and then I always thought of the role of mayor. You're a bit of a brand manager too, right? I mean, you're representing the community, you're speaking on behalf of council, you're speaking to issues that you feel are important. And I certainly took lots of that latitude when I was mayor. Years older, I'd like to believe I'm more mature. I would do a few things a bit differently, but the types of things I cared about and the direction that I believed the city needed to go in, I would still have gone in that direction. But, some of the exchanges and the heat of the moment, if I could do some of those over, I think I would. When you look back at your time as mayor in particular, I think, what are you most proud of?
This is the hardest question. I can't pick one. I will say that I'm really proud of our work in our social inclusion work. So we're a member of UNESCO's Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. And the reason I often choose that one is because I think when it first off goes back to that original slogan, a city that works for everyone. And my sense is when you make decisions with everyone in mind, you're making better decisions. And I feel that we have made some really great decisions for our residents, keeping everyone in mind. Our work in transit, the fact that we now have Sunday service and half-hour service, like enhanced transit services, because we're thinking of the folks that can't afford to have two cars, which is
Right.
essentially what you need to get around this city. when, you know, our work, all of our work in culture at the New Performing Arts Center, that investment, that is because we were thinking of the creative sector that really hasn't had its influx of a capital investment. That's another example. When I think of even, and I think of our inclusion work, and I think of our work with Sun Six with St. Mary's First Nation, but with Indigenous peoples, and some of the work with just simple things like we did not do a land acknowledgement at council until I became mayor. We did not fly the Wolastoqey flag out front of City Hall until I became mayor. Like there were just certain things, or I'll say until this council, because I don't do it alone, right? My whole council, this was their direction. So a lot of things that I'm really, really proud of come out of that spirit of inclusion and of thinking of everyone. So they're some of the top ones, like again, the Performing Arts Center, the Sunday Transit, the our relationship with Indigenous people, certainly raising the profile of women as decision makers. That's something that I'm very proud of. But
Beautiful.
I would be, well, maybe we're going to get to this, working well with other orders of government.
Yeah.
That's been the game changer for our city. And it is, we do it because it's the right thing to do. It's also, if you have good relationships with your partners and other orders of government, you bring other dollars into your city other than taxpayer dollars, other than your municipal taxpayers, right? So you're paying, all of a sudden, you can have a whole slew of services that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. And we've gotten a lot better at those relationships. And like I say, didn't do it for money at all. That's not why. We did it because it's the best way to govern.
Yeah, I thought it was very impressive, your committee that works on, social challenges, homelessness,
Community Safety
addiction.
Task Force.
Yeah, it was really impressive when, I was reading through the documents and I was looking at sort of those that regularly attend, and I was like, "Wow, like, this very impressive that you were able to get," and again, I think that's exactly what should happen. I think you're modeling exactly what should happen. I've often used the, sort of analogy of EMO, if we have a flood or, if we have a big fire, we turn on those resources. But we don't always take the same approach. At least I'll speak for St. John. We don't always take that kind of collaborative, unified, urgent response when it comes to some of the social challenges. And I think, what you were modeling in Fredericton is fantastic that you had decision makers all coming together on a regular basis. I mean, the work is happening, but it's so critically important to have everyone understand who's doing what, that there be a plan, that we are measuring our sort of progress. Because as you talk about a community that's, a community that serves everyone in that community. I mean, we have, we're really struggling, I think, as communities with the level of addiction, mental health, homelessness,
It's
and the
devastating.
yeah. Yeah, it's devastating. I mean, we had 39 people die here last year in St. John. I mean, those numbers are probably very similar around the major cities in New Brunswick. And, how do you scale that up if you don't have that collaborative relationship with those other orders of government, right?
You don't. I mean, we can't do that work. For one thing, it's not our authority. We don't have the authority to do some of that work. So we
Yeah.
have to work with our partners. Interesting you did the EMO analogy. Minister Miles, because she was a regular participant, and these people came. They never missed. They came and they sat around that table. But at the first meeting, and when we were talking about your attendance is critical because we all have to be on the same page of learning and knowledge when we come to make the recommendation. So you can't miss presentations. We have to be here learning together. And she said at the first meeting, she's like, I'll be here because to me, this is the equivalent of like, this is like an emergency response. Like we have to treat this like the crisis it is. And so if it means that I spend 2 hours every other Friday here doing this, yeah, I'm doing it. This is a crisis. And I loved that was the spirit that people brought, that we had to put that kind of urgency needed to be behind that work. It was such fulfilling, rewarding work. And again, when you look at your career, I'm like, this is what Andy was talking about when we set up the Social Policy Research Network and I wrote the paper on network governance. This is networked governance.
Yeah.
And we were living it out and we continue to. Monday night's council meeting, we pat two of the recommendations that came out of that community safety task force. We brought those projects forward on Monday night.
Right.
One was a treatment facility, and the other was a youth hub.
Nice. When you implemented your, community safety teams, was there a lot of support for that in the community? Was it 50-50? Did you get a bunch of blowback on that investment? What was that like in Fredericton? you implemented that team?
So, I mean, there was definitely concern, like, so it was a response. We knew we had to do something, particularly in the business districts. That's where it was being felt most in the trails, and we knew we had to do something. Luckily, it was actually Don Arnold and I had lunch with the mayor from out west at an FCM, and I brought that idea back to my CAO and said, "Here's an idea, like, let's figure out how we could deliver on this." And so he began figuring out how to deliver on it, and we were really concerned, how was it going to be viewed? We did it incrementally. So we did a pilot first, and we did sort of restrict in the more, they weren't restricted areas, but a much smaller area of coverage for fewer hours. We wanted to know how they would work with outreach, how they would work with the Fredericton Police Force. So we were kind of incremental, and all we kept hearing from people is they're great and we want more. We want more. We want more. But then it became a real budget discussion. And it wasn't just the CSSU was one, but we had taken police out of schools, so we needed to get police back in schools. Everybody was complaining we didn't have enough officers on the beat. It's because we didn't have a full complement of officers because we couldn't get them trained. So then we had to like fund an academy to train officers to get to full complement. So it was quite a budgetary commitment. And we had councillors who voted again, like who voted that included those expenditures. And I think it was because they felt, I don't know, for whatever, for various reasons, there would have been people who would say public safety is important, but they didn't want to make the investments because it's really expensive. Public safety, as you know, for municipal governments, it's a very big budget line. But if you really care about it, you have to pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, agreed. Your budget really shows what you care about. So if you're not funding arts and culture, I mean, not to be that harsh, but you don't care. So I mean, St. John is a big community. Edgerton and Moncton fit inside St. John with a small population. It's old, very old. I've lost track. The city will be somewhere in the 238-year-old right birthday this year. That's a big birthday. Old infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure. So, there's always those budget constraints. And St. John is a very gritty. There's a grittiness. It's a wonderful, wonderful city. And I asked that question about the public safety teams because, of course, like we had a boiling over here in St. John in the fall. With just the community is tired and the unhoused are tired, everyone's tired, and it sort of boiled over, do something. We're tired of the and so on, and I'm not for a moment believing that, that the unhoused cause every issue in the city because they don't. But it's interesting, I mean, and again, social media is just a snapshot. There's been quite a bit of pushback. So in one breath, it's do something, respond. Business owners wanted a response. And then, certainly some of the candidates have really attacked the community response teams. It's a waste of money. It was horrible. Shouldn't have hired them. And they just don't understand first of all, what the community was asking for is my belief. But the second piece, then we'll move on here. But the second piece is that, you know, uh, first responders is the largest, police and fire is the largest investment at over $60 billion a year in the city of St. John budget. And, they don't need to go to every nuisance situation, and a gun doesn't have to be at every one of those situations and so on. And I think the main point, I guess, is for me, Kate, is I wonder, I often think that we're not as effectively as we could getting at the root causes of these issues. We're just not addressing the underlying issues, mental health, addiction. I mean, just being unhoused. I mean, you can't, I grew up in Fredericton. My folks divorced when I was a young boy, went to St. Dunstan's, went for a while to junior high before we moved to St. John. We lived on Charlotte Street. I still drive by the house every time I'm up. And, by many definitions, my mom worked for, I mean, we're all interwoven. I mean, we'll probably find out where you and I are cousins or
Absolutely
something.
related, yes.
My mom worked, in nonprofit. My mom worked for the city of Fredericton. So we're interwoven. And I'm so intrigued by that piece that coming, maybe it's from the corporate world, I don't know, where let's diagnose it, let's put a plan in place, let's get at the root causes. We might have to take incremental steps to get us there. But I worry, especially for the homeless and social challenges that we face as communities, that that the response isn't quite as scaled as it needs to be, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not saying people aren't working hard, because they are working hard, but it's that scale of response, when we have, 4 or 500 people in St. John right now in some stage of homelessness, right?
So
Very, very
I
challenging.
agree the root so we just recently released a number, it was like $8.7 million that we spent on addressing issues related to homelessness, ultimately. I mean, it wasn't, these were the statistics of, a third of our police calls are people with mental illness or substance use disorders, and they go out on distress calls, lots of the folks who are unhoused, but also just doing the outreach and the encampment stuff and like just all of that. And it was so frustrating seeing that number. And I'm like, I would have given anything to put that $8.7 million towards housing for folks, towards
Yeah,
treatment for folks, towards youth diversion programs, for just something that was constructive as opposed to just reactive, reactive, reactive. And it was one of the reasons that we did the Community Safety Task Force was to have all the players at the table hearing this together and
yes,
having a clear sense of it was I kept talking about it like a potluck, like sort of a, okay, what am I bringing to this solution table, right? Like, what is my role? What am I bringing? And those commitments were made. But you are right. Some can happen more speedily. And ultimately, the police response can happen more quickly than maybe the Department of Health response or the Department of Social Development response, right? Because they're bigger systems and they have and it's figuring out how to move those systems to do an urgent response is they're designed differently than police who are already designed for urgent response. Like
sure.
those departments aren't designed for urgent response, but that's what they're being faced with now because of what is happening in the society, in the world. And so it was very interesting. And to uncover that was really interesting. But I am 100% with you. Every cent we spend there, I'm like, there's a better way to be spending this dime
Yeah.
or this. And
Well, we're
yeah,
get out of crisis, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If we flip to the other side of what you're proud of, what was the hardest moment you faced as mayor?
Yeah, and I know that I had to think about this early on. So there have probably been lots, but early on, we had the Freedom Convoy come through Frederick.
Yeah,
And I don't know, it was really important to me that they know that this was not a place where they were welcome. And my police chief felt the same. We were seeing what was happening in Ottawa. We're like, this isn't happening. Like, we're not letting this take over our streets. We have things that we want to do here. We are not going to be stalled by this. So, and because it was early on, it was sort of a, how do I respond? There's always this urgency sometimes to come out strong and forceful and all that. But that's not always the best play. And I would say I could carry that lesson to throughout my time on council. There are often times when you don't want to be restrained, right? Like you want to be more vocal, you want to tell the whole story, but it is a leadership quality you need to know when to show restraint. And I have learned that lesson. I am a vocal person, but it has been a really important lesson to me to learn when to be restrained. I don't drama, it maybe feels fun and you get a little like it certainly the news love it. It's newsworthy. Like it's news, but it's not good for the community. Tension, when you're creating drama and tension and using your seat to do that, it's not good for the community. So I would say that would be an example of a time where it was really important, again, that we be firm but that we not be strident that we instead be controlled and measured. And luckily I had a very experienced, we've had some great police chiefs. And really there have been 5 since I've been on council. I've worked with 5 different police chiefs. They've all been great in their own way. This police chief at the time that we were at City Hall all weekend. And at one point I was like, oh my gosh, aren't you stressed? He was like, I did security he was former RCMP. He's like, I
yeah,
did security for the Vancouver Olympics. This is enough. I was like, okay, okay, let's put this into perspective then.
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. People see the role, but not always the cost. What did it cost you personally?
Quiet.
Or
Yeah.
or did it? Yeah,
Yeah. No, no. Quiet, contemplative time. Probably that. Yeah. Quietness, privacy. This is a lonely job. I don't know.
yeah,
And other mayors, I don't get a chance to talk to them much about that because you give all of your social energy to the role that when you're not working, you just kind of want to go home and hide, right? And just because you need to restore and re-energize and sleep. And so as a result, I've really missed um, my private social time because all of my social energy goes to the city, which I
Yeah.
also love. So
Yeah.
that's the other challenging part. Like, I love this job. I love all of the community events I go to. Like, I love it all. But at the same time, it takes a lot of energy so that when you're not doing it, you then don't have a lot left for the other things in your life. And I've
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah. How about, the criticism when it got how did that land for you? Are you someone that absorbs that? Does it just slide off your back? How do you deal with the criticism and the critique?
Well, I don't like the fact that people are talking about me, so I don't know if that's a very like, in Fredericton, everybody talks about everybody all the time.
Yeah.
They
Well,
probably do
here
everywhere.
too, Bobby. Yeah, yeah, everywhere.
So I would say to my husband, "I just want people just to not think about me. Like, just I'm the mayor, I work, it's a job, I make decisions, I don't want them talking about it." And he was like, "Well, you are a politician, and that's part of the job." But I don't engage in social media. We post, I'm very active on social media in the sense I'm very involved because I want people knowing what I'm doing. And we have an interesting partner in the media right now, right? Like, they're telling the stories they want to tell, but for us to be telling the city stories and the things that we're doing, it's important that we be putting that out there ourselves. So I have a pretty active social media presence. Once it's posted, I don't look at the comments.
Okay. So that's a, safety net or a coping mechanism that you've developed. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's,
It's
that's great
restraint.
advice.
You want to talk restraint on?
I failed at it because, I knew we were in, and look, when I do it differently, probably a bit differently today, but, I became mayor in 2016. The census came out and the narrative was everything is great. The census came out in 2021, excuse me, in the fall of 16, September. I still can remember it like it was yesterday. And our population retracted by 2,475 people, which impacted the grant by $3 million.
I remember.
So right away we were in
Mhm.
distress because as and we had been very lethargic, we had no growth and we were just in a mess. So I believed that I needed to set the stage and I believed in engaging with people, but the energy that it took, Kate, is just unbelievable. I mean, I was spending, I did all, I mean, I don't know about the mayor's office in Fredericton, but I mean, I was lucky to get one helper, one person, and I did all my own social media and I responded. I tried and I had pride in responding and setting the record straight. And so I was spending, I was spending 30 to 40 hours a week just on social media. Then I led a full agenda. I was having all of those meetings and so on. So,
So
I think if I was doing it over, I would try to do it differently for sure.
So I learned from you, if
Yeah.
that helps. And because I was watching what you were going through and seeing that and was really disappointed when you didn't reoffer. That being said, I love Donna. We have a great relationship too. But I was really sad because I thought you were an amazing mayor. And I knew that part of it, you were just, I mean, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. You know why you didn't reoffer. But from my sense, that these jobs are exhausting. I mean, who's kidding who? You work they're like 60-hour weeks, and then you don't sleep all night because that's the only time you have to think and process. And then you worry. And so these jobs are enough. And then if you are with the whole social media aspect, I knew that that was a lot for you. And when I became mayor, I actually said to my CAO, I think it's really important. We have to be engaging on social media. I do for my own self-preservation. I don't want to be the one doing it. So we had a dedicated resource in comms who posts on social media and monitors the comments. And people need to know if a comment comes with a question or something, we respond. We
Right.
also have a code of conduct. If it gets really mean, they hide them. Like, we do actively engage, but I personally don't go on and look because I saw what it was doing to some really great leaders, and I didn't want that to happen. Now, we too, though, or I share. So luckily, I have that resource in comms, but we share an admin. I share an admin person with my CAO and deputy
Yeah.
CAO. There's not enough admin support.
Yeah.
Mayors are not treated. This idea that, I don't know, the pension and that we get all. I took a
Yeah.
major, as you would have too, a significant pay decrease to become the mayor. Like I
Yeah.
took a hit, our household took a hit so that I could become the mayor. So there's just not resources for that kind of support. But I did, so I did learn from you, and I'm sorry that you
Well, there
had
you
to
go.
learn
No, you're welcome. You're welcome.
that you learned that
I
lesson for us. But
Yeah. I think that is that personal toll, right? Because I mean the narrative, and again, St. John is, at least it's just again a very scrappy, town. I think it's our sort of blue collar roots, a very strong union town, and it's a lovely, amazing town, amazing city. But I mean, people think nothing about telling you to go f yourself walking down the street. So I really resonated with your comments around. So I'm very extroverted. I mean, I had a lot of gas in the tank, a little less these days, but a lot of gas in the tank. So run down that I would literally need to hide,
yeah.
and because you couldn't do anymore. So it's a great segue. I just want to ask about civility. We've talked about that with some of the other former mayors as well. You've seen politics up close. Has civility changed?
Gosh, it's changed just this term. I cannot get over how uncivil, and it's funny you talk about St. John and St. John's character. Fredericton has this character of being painfully polite to everyone's face. God knows what they're saying. Closed doors. But my understanding is all of that has changed. And while I say I'm not on social, I'm personally on social media. I have my own personal account. And
Sure.
so I am on social media. Just don't troll my Mayor Kate stuff because I don't want to read the comments. So I do see how people talk. I'm like, I can't believe that people speak this way, that anyone thinks that it's acceptable or appropriate to speak this way, to speak of others this way. The racism, like the racist comments, the sexist comments, mean spirited, the nasty, the violent comments. People are so violent about whatever, like the craziest, a flag raising or anything they get. And that feels very new. Like I don't recall, like I say, 3 terms on council. I didn't feel any of that. It's just been this past term. Frankly, it has really been exacerbated by the behavior in the States that has validated this poor behavior. And I would say even by some of our national figures, political figures who also behave that way. And so it's giving rise and to others are suddenly feeling it's permissible to talk that way.
It's very concerning. I mean, Adam Lorden made the comment that, and I know B has done a whole 2-day conference on sort of harassment and civility, and I believe have made some requests of the provincial government. I don't know exactly the answer to get out of this, but I mean, I think we do need strong leaders. We need leaders who can be, in my opinion, firm but civil, and that is a really difficult, pushback. I mean, I always believed in pushing back against whether it was racism or anti-immigrant sentiment or, just even setting the record straight. But I was having this chat with a friend on the weekend, and he was saying, "Well, where's that line between accountable and toxicity?" Because I think a lot of folks, and sorry, one other bit of context, Kate. I think coming out of COVID, I think COVID ripped the joy out of people's lives. I think we are having, and we're seeing affordability issues and challenges. People are struggling day to day. So if you don't have joy in your life and you're struggling and your future doesn't look as bright, um, you are already walking through life in a very challenged way. And I'm not trying to excuse away the behavior because it is horrible and unacceptable. I just try to come at it from a place of empathy to understand what's going on in that individual's life that has them behaving in such a way, but it's not okay. It's like it's toxic, it's horrible, it's going to keep the right type of leaders from running,
Mhm,
or they're just gonna be so exhausted they have to bow out, and I think that's what impacted
mhm.
me, and I'm gonna ask you here in a minute about your own decision. But the civility piece, I guess, what concerns you most about the direction we're heading, and do you have any thoughts on how we turn this ship around?
So I am with you. There is a heaviness in the world right now. You can feel it on people. You can see it in people's faces. There's just this underlying heaviness and stress, and which leads, I think, to this lack of joy. So I totally hear what you're saying. I do believe there needs to be a zero tolerance. And I do feel that certainly from a social media perspective, that there could be more controls on what is permissive on those social media sites. They just think, we used to say that it was Twitter or X that was like a cesspool. But now even something as friendly as Facebook is becoming that way too. And I think that there needs to be ways to monitor that and monitor language or controls, or I find it hard to believe with all of our advancements, technological advancements and AI and all of that, that there isn't a way that we can be eliminating. And I know people would say, oh, that's censoring. And I don't want to go there. But at the same time, there have to be certain rules, just like it used to be that if you listen to CBC, they would blank out if you said a naughty word, right? Like there has to be, we have to be, I can't imagine that we couldn't figure that out if we wanted to, because the flip side is that, yeah, you're going to have a lot of really wonderful people who are not putting themselves forward for a public office because it's not an environment where you can actually be, I won't say, it's hard to be effective in that environment, right? It is hard to, because even if you're doing amazing things, there's so much noise and it's so nasty and cruel, it gets lost. And then people get frustrated and then just give up and leave, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what's going to happen if we don't figure it out, but we have to figure out a way how to monitor these places
Yeah.
where people are being so cruel.
I agree 100%. It's we're so polarized, and I think it starts with our own behaviors.
Mm,
As anyone in the elected, anyone that's a leader, but elected officials in particular, I think it starts with their behavior, and that's everyone.
mm,
I talk often about it with my boss, about those behaviors. I think it's got to be codes of conduct. I think it
mm,
has to be social media balanced. I'm not an expert. I have opinions, but I mean, there are folks out there that came from within that. Tristan Harris,
mm,
who wrote the Social Dilemma, or was in that Social Dilemma documentary. So I think but the thing that scares me most, Kate, is if we look at the impact on society, the impact on young people, teens, preteens, we are on the wrong
mhm.
course. But the problem is if the most important societal issues we face, because of the polarization, when we bring those topics up, both sides of that argument just scream at each other.
Mhm.
So let's use the example where we say, we think we should have some balanced review of social media so that, the algorithm isn't weaponizing us. And then we say things like that. Somebody screams, I'll never stand for freedom of expression being limited. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we shouldn't allow, I'm saying, sorry, I don't want to put words in
Mm.
your mouth. We shouldn't allow tech billionaires, the richest people in the world, to get you and I to dislike each other through an algorithm when actually we probably agree on a whole bunch of things, right? So it's like we've got to learn how to be civil again, but we also have to take away, we legislated the sale of cigarettes
Right.
because we knew that the data showed it was very
Mhm.
bad for us. It was killing people. And now there's a whole bunch of regulation there. So this is no different. And when you look at the data, there's overwhelming evidence that we need to do something here, right?
I agree, and we do have to because it is. I mean, it's having damage. There's damage everywhere. Like we talk about young
Well,
people. We
yeah.
talk about public life. It's creating damage everywhere.
I can't imagine what it's like to be a teen today, and what they go through. Honestly, I don't even our youngest is 26. So, I'll chat with him about this once in a while, and he'll say, I mean, he's been out of high school for a number of years now, but he said, "Dad, like, you have no idea what was going on in high
Yeah.
school." And that's several years ago. So imagine what's going on there today.
And a record of everything. That's what my I have a
Yeah,
26 and a 23-year-old, and they'll be like, "You were so lucky. You could go and have a crazy night out and embarrass yourself, and nobody was taking a picture or videoing it and posting it." And it was a
yeah.
liberating time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. When you think about advice, for candidates, and I think, you said earlier before we started, from an election perspective, you're not running. We're gonna talk about that in a second, but you've really stayed out of this election. Is that you're on the sidelines, you're really not engaged at all?
I'm engaged a little bit, but
Okay.
I'm not going to I haven't gone to any of the forums or debates or events like that where the candidates are speaking.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I haven't. It would be too
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. I find it very hard. I've been out I mean, I haven't been mayor now for 5 years, right? We're into the 2nd election, and I still find it very difficult to watch.
When not
What's
campaigning, like I
oh,
love campaigning. So
oh,
I've
do you?
campaigned in 3 elections.
Right.
And I find it really hard. Oh, I love going door to door. I love canvassing. I love having little campaign teams and wearing buttons and putting up
Oh,
signs
wow.
and my husband getting the map out and us deciding where we're putting the signs. And I really miss all that stuff. Yeah.
When you think about council or candidates even, what skills matter that people don't talk about?
Well, people certainly underestimate, I will say for the mayor in particular, I think all of council needs to have an understanding of the importance of relationships with other orders of government. Because particularly in New Brunswick, most of our revenue is generated by the taxpayer and our
Right.
population isn't property tax like they're paying. It's those who own. So in Fredericton's only a little over half of our residents even pay property tax, right? And so much of our budget is reliant on those property taxes. And so the only way that we can deliver the services that everyone wants is to have partnerships with other orders of government. And I feel that that is completely not only just misunderstood, it is not known. It's not talked about. And so I believe my council is becoming increasingly is actually quite knowledgeable on that, to be honest. We've had to approve a lot of funding agreements, but that is squarely in the mayor's job. Like that's sort of the government relations, the building partnerships, the being out in the community and getting the pulse of the community to find out what it is that the community wants. Because I don't think you do find out on Facebook. I think you find out at being at events, talking to people. One thing that I have not changed in my behavior, I do everything I always did. I go to the grocery store, I go to the market, I go to concerts, I do everything that I always did, go to the movie theaters, go to Walmart, go to everything. And that so to keep my finger on the pulse of what it is that people want. And then we have to figure out how to deliver it. And we can't deliver it on our own as as municipality. And so
Right.
that is really, really important. And you need a person in this role who's really good at doing that work and values the importance of that work.
Right.
And not just for us, like for our residents and for our province and for our country. Like it's really important that we're all working together. I've always been active with B and I'm on the FCM board.
Nice.
Those relationships are really, really important.
Yeah. How do you find that, we'll start to turn the corner around the finish line here. I'm intrigued by, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you have to have those relationships, with the different levels of government. I don't think citizens always understand. I think the municipal government and municipal leaders are closest to the people and people are frustrated, and they don't always understand who's responsible for what. And we see that. We see folks in municipal elections saying, "Well, I'm not going to vote for that councillor because they haven't solved X or Y," and
They
that's
don't have
not
a
even a
doctor.
municipal.
That's what we hear.
Yeah, yeah,
56%
yeah,
of our residents have a doctor.
yeah,
They say that.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I'm intrigued. Like, I struggle with that piece because, I thought it was important to have those relationships. Absolutely 100% agree. But I'm a big believer in mutually accountable relationships. Like, if you tell us you're going to do something, do it. Like, what's the timeline? What's the outcome? And I struggled with that piece that, we would lobby and we'd advocate and we would say all the nice things publicly, but it wasn't always the case behind the scenes and, navigating that piece. And
Mm.
I've just found that very difficult. Like how you done that? Has the relationships you've built, those have translated to getting results in a timely fashion for you, Kate?
I feel they have, like we have good relationships. We have very open communication. So I can
Yeah,
talk, we share frustrations with each other. We all try very hard, all of the elected officials that would be, ministers of departments that I work with or my regional caucus or whatever. We communicate with each other as opposed to through the media.
nice.
And we express frustration with each other. I am very clear all the time. We're not stepping in your lane. We'll exhaust, we'll fill our jurisdictional responsibilities to the broadest expanse. Like we have expanded on the work that we're doing, but I'm not crossing the line. I don't have the authority to do it, and I expect you to be doing it. And so the expectation is really clear. I don't mince words. And I say it publicly and I say it privately, but it's always said very respectfully because I know that their jobs aren't easy either. Right? Like we
No.
think, it's so easy to blame the province or blame the feds and they can blame, oh, those mayors. And none of us have easy jobs right now. And our work is made far more productive if we're being really kind and respectful and trying to understand each other and understanding what each other's barriers are something else that I find really helpful is our city. It's not just on an elected official level. I find our staff are
Right.
working really well together now and sharing frustrations and being like, "You promised this 3 months ago. Why haven't you delivered?" But they say it. It's very open and frank, and then
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to be Pollyanna about it, Don. Like it's frustrating, sure, and I'm sure they're frustrated too. But I have seen when we used to not talk, or we used to communicate through letters, that doesn't work either. We used
Yeah.
to throw each under
That
the
doesn't work.
bus.
Yeah.
That did
Yeah.
not work at all. I would far prefer to do it collegially, and I think we're starting to it's like moving a big ship, but I do feel that there's a little bit of movement.
I think you but I think you hit on it beautifully. Oh, like, this is how we're gonna work together. It's gonna be built on a foundation of respect. But what I heard in your language was, "But we're gonna chat
Mhm.
honestly and openly with each other and hold each other accountable." So I think you answered the question. Okay, so you've decided not to run again. How did you arrive at that? And I sense it was a very difficult, decision for you. How did you arrive
Oh
at
my
that?
gosh, it was
Yeah.
so hard. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my whole life. I can honestly say that because I love my job. I love I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. I just have a sense that I'm meant to love something else. Like, I feel that there's something I've amassed all of these to a bunch of things. Personal level, I
Yeah.
feel I've amassed some skills and knowledge and capabilities, and I have given them to the municipal government for 14 years, 14 years of Monday nights, and I've been really committed, really dedicated, and I feel now that I would like to do that someplace else for a while as I end, I'm in the final stages of my career. I feel I would like to do that someplace else. That's one thing. The other thing is I've never been one. I'm not a career politician. I didn't aspire to be a career politician. Like, I didn't come into this with I want to be mayor. It was more, I want things for my city. And if the only way to do that is to be the mayor, I'll do it. And it wasn't just things. I wanted our city to take a different approach to the work. I saw an opportunity for us to modernize and make more sophisticated our approach to the work. That was why I ran for mayor, was to do that and to bring some things across the line. I wanted that performing arts. I was sick of talking about performing arts center. I wanted it done. I was sick of fighting with the public about Officer Square. I wanted it done. I was I was sad about the pool. Wish that had gotten done, but we're on a path. We're going to get that pool. So I think I felt and I've kind of accomplished what I set out to do, and I've put us in a direction that I felt we needed to move in. And now, to me, the success lies in then others continuing on with that work. I don't have because I didn't aspire to be a politician. I don't have that ego wrapped up in it, but I do really love the work, and I know I'm going to miss it, and that makes me sort of scared. like,
Yeah.
like, what am I going to do?
No, it's I don't know if you listen to Peter Mansbridge, has a number of podcasts, but one in particular I just love, and it's a great example of a liberal and a conservative, and they're civil, and they debate, and they have deep admiration for each other. So it's Peter Mansbridge and Jerry Butts, the former principal secretary for Prime Minister Trudeau, and it's, James Moore, former, Harper era minister, and just a
Look
wonderful
for
leader.
this.
Like, he's
Okay.
yeah, it's really good. It's on YouTube, and I just listened to an episode again today. And one of the things that James Moore, because they were talking about this inflection point that you had arrived at, and their view, James's comment, I've never forgotten it, "If you can't say, 'Hell yes,' don't
Oh,
do it."
interesting.
Right? And, look, you're going to reflect on your time with a lot of pride, and you should. I think it is a business or a role. It's a tremendous honor. I feel like so proud to have been mayor, but also don't believe it's the only way that you can make contributions to your community. It's one way. And I think it is heavy work, and it's getting heavier. So I think it should be a work that you do, and you do it with a long, a term view, council and the city staff and bureaucracy, and then you pass that baton to someone else who picks it up and keeps moving down down the field. And I don't think I've ever shared, when because I had announced I was going to run again, and it was a tough decision, in 21, and I had announced
Like, for 2020?
I did
Is right? Because we
for
thought we were gonna
20.
have an election in 2020, and then COVID.
Yeah, no, so well, we got
Yeah.
extended for a year, right? From 16 to and then we got extended to 21. Anyway, and I had announced, I had the team together, I don't think I've ever shared. I had the team together, we were ready to go, we had had meetings, and I announced we decided I'm gonna announce on a Saturday, and I went and I did a live session, and it was heavy, it was a tough job, and I had shared openly the challenges of the job. And when I hit stop on the live session, Kate, I wept like I had never wept before. Like it just flooded out of me. And I sat with that. I said, okay, that's interesting. And I sat with that for, probably a week. Probably didn't say a whole lot maybe to my wife, Patty. And then I said, I think we need to go away. And we went away and we talked it through and I just arrived and I said, okay, that was a sign. Like, so I just, and again, it wasn't easy. These are not easy decisions because you love your community. You love many aspects of the role. Some other aspects of the role are heavy. And my personal belief is that, you know, we don't make perfect decisions all the time. We make the
Mhm,
best decision
mhm,
at the time.
mhm.
Right, and so that was my own journey, it was difficult, I would always tell people there's times where, I loved like you, I loved the role, it's hard to watch from the sidelines, it's hard not to be engaged because you still care about your community, and I'm sure I've ruffled some people, but, I believe as a citizen, I also have a
Mhm.
right to be
Yeah,
engaged,
I
right?
agree. And I'll say it's funny you mentioned that moment. I gave my State of the City speech in November, and I had not planned on saying it. It wasn't even conscious. At the very end, I said, "Thank you. It has been a privilege to be your mayor." And I started crying. And I went to sit down, and I had this voice in my head just said, "That's your last State of the City." And I think
Here, yeah, that's it,
I knew then, and then I had lost my mother passed, and
yeah,
so there were other things that weighed heavy when I was making that decision, but they weren't the reason for the decision. I think I had known prior to that, that my time in this role was done. My time of serving and contributing to my community is not done. And somebody better give me a job or God knows I'll wreak havoc. I'm
yeah,
sure I
yeah,
will
yeah,
not be good if I don't have a directed no. I'm really actually totally teasing. I really just kind of need a break. And as
yeah,
you know, you need to sleep. But I really do want to do something else, but I think I knew. So when you sort of said you turned that off and you knew, I think at the end of that speech, I thought, my work here is done. I'm really
just
proud of what we've accomplished and the direction that we're going in. And time for me to do something else. And time for someone else to come in. Like I've always been a believer in that too. Your success, a lot of it is your long term success requires others to be able to do the work.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way that you arrived at that, almost like it's that sort of like intuitive, you knew it before, you sort of caught up to that spot
Mhm.
that you had arrived in. I think it's beautiful, and I think when we lose our parents and, big life events happen to us, we
Mhm.
evolve, right? We get to a spot where we say, "Okay, what was important yesterday isn't quite as important," right? What gives you hope right now?
So, one of my many favorite things that I do in my job is I go to schools a lot and talk to children. There's a subject like in grade 4, they do a civics section, and so I often go to grade 4 classes. I go to school, any school that asks me to go to something, I go. I go to high
I
schools a
love
lot. I
that,
go to
yeah.
universities. I'm really and I'm oh wait, these kids are engaged. Like these elementary school kids that I talk to, they know what's going on. Their parent they must talk about it at home and they're talking about it in their schools and I'm really encouraged by the engagement of youth. Youth actually give me hope. I truly mean that. We have and even university students, Renaissance College, often we have kids who come and do a project, a social action project. We have the social work students from STU that often come to I chair the Affordable Housing Committee. They come to those meetings and I just see the engagement of youth and I see the way that they approach the work very sensitively, very inclusively and respectfully. And I am very encouraged by that. I'm also very encouraged in our city, the increasing diversity in our city, because I think it's bringing perspectives and opening our minds. For those of us who are willing to have our minds opened, I feel that happening. So I know we can focus a lot on what is also true, the polarization and the shutting down and the dejection and rejection of knowledge. But I am also seeing amongst young people a welcoming for it. And that gives me hope.
That's beautiful. I agree. I loved, yeah, I loved those civic sessions and going down and chatting with young leaders. I always called them young leaders. You're young leaders. To no, don't let anyone limit your ability to contribute to our community because you're young leaders, you know. Final question. If you could leave one message for people thinking about leadership, public service, or even just how we treat each other, what would it be?
Openness, openness to others' ideas and contributions, respect, listening, talking, just showing up. The presence is so important, and really showing up. Like, don't just like be there for 5 minutes and take a picture and go. Like, show up, stay the hour, talk to the folks who are there, like be present and be open and listen and communicate, exchange. Look, that's what makes us human. They are all human qualities. And that's what sets us, to me, sets us apart. And that is how you build community. And I used to say, because I worked in community, and I would say, I want to bring the community into the city. That was my goal. And
Yeah.
because that's what our city is. Our city is an organization that represents community. And we need to be humans in that community and behave with all those attributes that I mentioned.
Beautiful. I think Andy Scott would be very proud of you. I think he would say you are inspiring. I think he would say you are a mentor. You know, sometimes we don't see that in ourselves, but I think this chat, and you've been so gracious with your time, I think this chat is going to inspire a lot of people on what it means to be a leader who listens, who engages. And, you know, it really struck me too. I mean, I want to blurt this word out. There's no ego in this discussion. You're just showing, you're going to do the work, you're going to listen, you're going to engage, and with a strong vision, with strong leadership to, you know, point the ship, but you know, make sure there's lots of
Mm,
space for others to contribute to what's going on. So I think it's been an inspiring conversation, and I wish you all the
thank you.
best in this next chapter. It's a
Yeah.
chapter in a book, and I'm excited to hear about the next chapter, Kate, in your book, and what comes next for you as you rest for a bit. But then likely you're going to jump right back up again, and we're going to hear some exciting news about what
Whatever
you're up
that
to
is. Well,
next.
thank you. And Don, thank you for this opportunity. I think it's so gracious and kind of you to invite us, those of us, who do this work, to participate and have this, just to have this platform to talk about these jobs that are this job in particular, that's so important to me. And I know was so important to you and so like instrumental in our lives, right? Really have helped shape who we are. And so this has been a delight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, you too.
Take care.